REI Live SRQ, and I also work with investor quarters. I see a couple of new names that I don't recognize, so welcome to joining us virtually. We have Holly, and I'm going to mispronounce your name, so will you say it for me?
Nikolich.
Nikolich here. She's a local real estate attorney out of Sarasota that's going to share some stuff that she's seeing happen and how we can help our businesses through this transition.
So mainly this hasn't affected the flipping side of what you guys do yet. So I'm going to kind of stay out of that territory. I know that construction workers are considered essential businesses that are still able to operate right now. And it doesn't seem like anything is slowing down in that industry. However, I do hear that at some point the supply chain for certain items could be affected because, of course, we get items from China, we get items from outside of the country, and those factories and businesses have been shut down from wherever you get your supply items. But as far as right now, flipping is still business as usual as far as I know. What's really been interesting about this last 2 weeks is, of course, a lot of people are trying to get out of real estate contracts. You have evictions that are not able to proceed as normal, which we can get into later. And you have, let's see, evictions are affected, foreclosures, which Donald Trump has said that are on hold for any federally backed mortgages. And you have, of course, the CARES Act, which everyone has questions about every day for me, as far as what they're entitled to in this situation and how can their business be helped with all of this going on. So, so anyway, yeah, Catherine and I were talking a little bit about real estate closings and how we could continue them without any contact with people, and what the legislatures are doing, as well as what individual companies are doing to kind of overcome and still have real estate closings happen. So in January, the Florida legislature said that remote online notarization was available and legal. And they were probably a little bit behind the curve. There had been 20, I believe, other states that have enacted that before Florida did. So other parts of the country were doing this at least a year or two before Florida was. So there were already platforms that were built and in place and functioning in order to have those remote online notaries available and ready to serve people with closings. So during this whole pandemic, people have gotten more comfortable with the idea that that is an option for them. And I've actually had 2 closings already where the sellers have signed with a remote online notary. One was actually ordered to stay inside because for the next 10 days after their closing that they were supposed to go to, they couldn't even leave the house. So they couldn't have witnesses or notaries in the house because they were exposed to someone with the virus. So they were told that they had to self-quarantine, and they had a closing. So we got this remote online notary platform for them, which is an extra cost to them, but it was not that much. It was $120. This is only available to U.S. citizens right now, this this remote online notary, but they were able to be, identified through the notary platform. The notary platform provided 2 witnesses, which is required on warranty deeds in Florida, and they were able to sign remotely. And so it was a successful situation there. When you go to get your remote online notary if you have a closing situation like this, you want to make sure that the title insurance underwriter for the transaction is accepting that kind of signature. And right now, my title insurance underwriter is Old Republic National Title Insurance Company. They've been around for a long time, and they are changing their title underwriting guidelines every day to deal with this situation. And basically they have said, as of right now, even today I got a bulletin that they are accepting all remote online notaries, even if the notary is in a different state than the signer, as long as the signer is a U.S. person and it's done by some sort of recognized platform from the National Notary Association, where they have all kinds of ID verification requirements before they start notarizing signatures. And how that really flows is that you have e-recording available now. So a clerk, to record a document, will take a scan of a document, so you can do e-recording, and you can also just print out that e-notarized document and then give that to the clerk, and they have to accept that as an original. So that was part of the legislation that was passed for remote online notarization. So when you have a closing and it's a seller and a buyer with a cash deal, you can definitely use this remote online notary platform. When you have a buyer with a lender, as we were talking about, your options might still be very limited because of the lender's requirements. You might have to still see in person or go to a closing if you're a buyer with a loan, because there's very few lenders right now that have gotten their underwriting requirements and their documents up to speed to, and their platforms to be able to e-sign every single closing document for the lending side. All right, let's see what else. I know a lot of people have questions on evictions lately and what's going on with that. The Florida Supreme Court did issue an order, I believe in the beginning of April, or it was either end of March or beginning of April, that the clerks are not required to issue writs of possession. So what that means is you can start an eviction case and you can get it through to the very end of the final judgment of possession. You know, you can have a regular answer period as soon as as long as the clerk is open, but you cannot get your writ of possession, which means you can't get that final step where the sheriff goes and serves the writ of possession. So you actually can't get anybody out at this present time. And that Florida Supreme Court order lasts until April 17th. So as far as the state lockdown for the whole 30 days of April, the Florida Supreme Court might extend that, because if we have a whole total lockdown situation and businesses are locked down, I would imagine that that's a possibility that they could extend that until businesses can open up, because you have a lot of hardship situations out there with tenants that really want to work and can't. That flows me into the increased unemployment capability for people that are out of a job. It's part of the CARES Act that you can file for regular unemployment, which gave you a certain percentage of your wages, you know, through the Florida Department of Revenue, your regular unemployment. But then the federal government has also authorized an extra, in addition to that regular unemployment that you would get. They've authorized an additional $600 per week. So if the tenants can apply for that, which they really should, I'm not sure of the exact requirements, but they can go and apply for that. They should be able to start making at least partial rent payments. So in my businesses and people that I counsel, I've told landlords, you know, if the tenant, give them a few weeks to get unemployment, because it's not going to be an immediate situation where they start getting checks. But if we're sitting here in May and it looks like a lot of people have started receiving unemployment and they're not making any payments, you know, at least get some documentation from them that they've applied for unemployment, or some sort of documentation, because there should be at least a little bit of money to pay the rent. You might not get your whole rent situation depending on, you know, their job and their particular circumstances. I think this is a very trying time for some people, and I think everyone should be handled on a case-by-case basis. But I also think that the tenants have to provide some documentation to the landlord to show which situation they're in as well. I don't think people can just sit at home and not do anything and then expect to not pay 2 or 3 months of rent. I think in some situations I've counseled landlords, hey, you may lose a month of rent. You may decide to credit a month of rent because it's cheaper than filing an eviction, having that eviction on hold, and then having a refurbish when you can finally get the tenant out. It might be better and cheaper just to take a little loss on your side, which I think we're going to have losses on all sides because of the situation, you know, to keep tenants in, especially tenants that were good tenants, or at least mediocre to good tenants. So that's my tenant situation report. I'd say in my businesses where we manage over about 3,000 houses combined, I would say about 40% have reported that they're going to have a problem paying rent. So there's going to be a lot of work on the property management side to deal with them, to treat them fairly, you know, to understand their situation, but also to look at documentation that they've been trying or are trying. And I would say, you know, that if they can apply for unemployment and get the regular amount, which is say 200 or 300 a week plus 600 a week, you know, then then that'll help pay some of the rents. So let's see what else is affected. You got foreclosures, you have the CARES, well, not the CARES Act, but before the CARES Act, Trump said there's a moratorium on foreclosures by federally backed mortgages. So not all mortgages are federally backed. You've got to contact your loan servicer to decide for them to tell you, or you can do some research or contact an attorney if you want. But if you have a federally backed mortgage, there's a moratorium on foreclosures for 90 days, meaning the payment doesn't go away. You still owe that money and possibly penalties and interest. It depends on your loan servicer whether they want to waive those. Also, federally backed mortgages are allowing you to waive a certain amount of monthly payments now and just tack them on to the end of your mortgage. I believe it's 3 months. So you can just not pay, you can get in a payment plan with them in writing first, where you don't have to pay 3 months, and then you have 3 extra payments at the very end of the life of the mortgage. So that's a pretty good deal. And I think as long as businesses open up fairly soon, that'll really help a lot of people from going into foreclosure and prices really plummeting to the floor because of those foreclosures. So I think that was smart of the administration to try to head off foreclosures as much as they possibly can. It's been a crazy week. I just had a client today that decided to walk away from a contract, and it was only a $280,000 property. He walked away paying $40,000 because he really thought, everyone's just guessing the market. It's a crazy time. No one knows what's going to happen or when things are going to open up. And when you're stuck in your house and told you're not allowed to go out, a lot of things are affected. So as far as that goes with the virus pandemic, are there any particular areas of law or questions that I didn't hit on that you would want to ask me?
I had a question. When you're a landlord and you are asking for that documentation, is there a certain way that you're advising people to ask for it, or a specific documentation that says that they have applied?
I mean, there is proof that they have applied for unemployment, so they can provide that to you. And I did hear that the website is actually having technical difficulties because so many people are trying to apply right now. So, and I know everyone wants an answer right now, where's your documentation? But I would just say be patient with tenants that are saying they're having a problem. Eventually, they will be able to either provide or not provide documentation of what they're doing. But anything that looks like that's from the Florida Department of Revenue, that's where you apply for unemployment. Anything from their employer, as far as you should know, if they're a recent tenant, you would know from their application who their employer is. If they've been in there a while, maybe they've changed employers, but I'm sure they can provide payment records to you as far as what they were paid and then what they are currently paid. Maybe they have severely reduced hours, or maybe it's down to 0. But most people can get something from their employer that you can verify that's a real business by Sunbiz, Division of Corporations, or just a Google search. You can verify that this letter that you're getting is from a real company that says their particular situation. So I would first look at those, and then I would say also not to be hard on tenants, but there usually is somebody in the family that can help them out. So hopefully they reach out, to their cousins or their aunts that aren't having a problem in this situation, and maybe get a personal loan or something, not saying they have to, but that's also something that the tenants that I've worked with personally already in these 2 weeks have to do, that are available to some of them,
How long are you, well, I guess I have two parts questions. For closings, have you seen a lot besides that one that doesn't seem like the smartest investment to walk away from, but have you seen a lot of contracts fall through because of lenders, or are you still seeing lenders loan? What are you seeing on the kind of that front?
The lenders are totally operational right now, as far as my experience. I haven't heard anything about any lender not being able to loan once they get into the underwriting phase. They still have plenty of money and are able to fund the loan. I have heard of underwriting requirements recently change, and they're changing every day. I just talked to a lender the other day that said any pre-approval letter that was issued before this coronavirus is no longer valid. I just had a buyer yesterday that she had a pre-approval letter. She thought she was good to go. And she had just signed a contract over the weekend. And I was the closing agent, so I was helping her out. And then she went back to the lender with all of her information, and her employer could not guarantee the number of hours that she was going to work because of the situation. So I went to my friend who's a lender who said, yeah, underwriting guidelines have completely changed. It's harder to get a loan. You have to really have an employer that guarantees a certain amount of income and work now. Credit scores have to be a little higher than they were before. Of course, you know, down payment is still the same down payment, but basically employment and continued employment is something that every lender is going to need and want right now, whereas it wasn't so critical before. And of course, like I said, credit scores are being more, they have to be higher to qualify for the same type of loan so before. And this lender said that they're getting more and more stringent every day. Every day they're getting bulletins on what they should and shouldn't be underwriting. And it's a very interesting time for them. So they are still underwriting and closing the loans that I've had in the pipelines. But as far as buyers that have just signed a contract or signing new contracts, they're looking very closely at them. And it might be harder for them to get loans in general, unless you're fully employed and your credit score is good. So that's that. Yep.
Have you seen any delays? And I guess a part of this is I just haven't read the regulations on what an essential business is and what isn't. But are the municipalities for title and lien searches, are those still considered essential businesses, and how are they functioning from your experience to do those searches?
As far as the counties that we operate in, which is Charlotte, Sarasota, Manatee, there's really no delays on that because they get that information from the municipality, the government workers themselves, you know, whether it's the utilities department or the code violation department or the building department. Those are the main three county departments that a municipal lien search comes into effect. So as long as those county departments are still fully operational, then there's going to be there hasn't been any delays in my municipality lien searches. And my title searchers are still fully there and operational for business. Of course, real estate attorneys and real estate agents and bankers and lenders are still considered an essential business. So I haven't seen any interruptions in that. Although there are some counties in Florida, and there's multiple counties domestic in the US, that they are not fully operational at the county. So they are having a problem with their municipal lien searches and their title search, and everything is getting delayed. I actually do, just for personal experience, I do have an issue with a closing that I have in Miami-Dade County, where the condominium association has completely closed. Because Broward County and Miami County have the highest rate of infections. So they have the most serious lockdown situation, and they have closed their office, and we're not able to get an association estoppel letter or any affidavits from them or anything. So that closing is completely on hold for that reason. So yeah, I think it all depends on which municipality you're dealing with and what the state of, you know, the county operations are, as well as all the other third parties that you have to deal with to get to a closing.
Right. Okay.
Yep.
Very cool. Thank you. Everyone has the ability to mute and unmute themselves. Do you guys have any other questions? I know that there's one comment. Yes, Jake is a black lab, so it's his dinner time, so he's being a little needy right now. I apologize about that. Are there any other questions or comments that you guys would like her to dive a little bit deeper into of what's going on right now? Jesse, Todd, or Tamiko? Everyone
Nope.
talking? Okay. So with everything still really being functioning, so we can still create our LLCs online and stuff like that as we do business. Do you want to talk a little bit about, hold on. For the situation in Miami-Dade, does the contract language change?
No, it actually falls under, there's a force majeure paragraph that basically doesn't specifically cover the COVID-19 virus pandemic, but it basically, I think you could make a valid argument. It basically says that other acts of God, whether if there is something that's going on that makes it an impossibility to close, then the standard FAR bar as is and regular FAR bar residential real estate contract, they have this force majeure provision that basically said the closing's on hold for up to 30 days until that impossibility is removed. So in the case with Miami-Dade with the condominium association, you know, neither the buyer or the seller can declare each other in default, and we're just completely on hold until we can get the correct information we need to close the deal. And in this case, condominium association stopper letter is part of clearing title. It's part of a title issue. So, so we really can't close without it.
Yeah.
So yes, you have 30 days. So if it lasts beyond 30 days, then we'll get into a really interesting situation, I would think, with a lot of contracts, because it only goes for 30 days. And then if you can't close within 30 days, then the parties have a right to cancel. That's what it says.
Very interesting. So when did Miami-Dade go into lockdown, or do you know how long they're under lockdown? This is a better question.
I don't know. I know that they were under lockdown before us for sure, because they had an outbreak quicker than us and a lot more cases. But what's interesting is this condominium association was responding to me during the lockdown, and then all of a sudden they decided to close. So I still think you're dealing with individual businesses that are deciding what to do with their own personal health and their own personal decisions, and just taking it day by day. I don't think that, it was interesting. 3 or 4 days ago, they were responding to me, and then I got a automatic reply email. Sorry, we've closed our office due to the COVID, lockdown. So yeah, you just have to keep trying. But yeah, we're under the 30 days right now. We're in the 30-day force majeure provision.
It's going to be interesting. So it'll be cool to see how we adapt and grow from all this stuff happening.
I really do like how we're growing and adapting as far as online closings in general. About 5 years ago, I was not living in Florida, and I was still trying to conduct closings. And so I would have an assistant here in Florida that would do my signings. And I thought to myself, this is just unsustainable. I mean, why do you have to go and physically sign when e-signatures were around? And it's because e-notarizations weren't available. And so when those started coming out in the early first states, I was pretty excited. And when 4 or 5 states pass it, then eventually other states will pass it. So like I said, Florida started this year, and I think every state is doing an emergency. I think even federal, I heard that even federal is mandating every state at this point to be able to take online notarizations, even if they didn't have their own statute, to deal with the fact that that's going to need to happen here pretty shortly to keep businesses and real estate going.
Absolutely. It looks like Jesse sent you a private message. So if you look at the top of your screen on the right-hand side, there's like a little chat box. It's probably orange.
Yep, I see it. I see the people. Is there a little chat box? Okay, let me see here. Oh, yeah. Okay. Should I just answer him? He sent it to me in private. Should I just answer him publicly?
If you want to read the question, and is that okay? No.
Okay. All right, then I can answer. I can type an answer to him when we're done with everybody else here.
He says no public. You can also unmute yourself if you would like. I think he's saying public. We can do it publicly.
Oh, we can do it publicly?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, Jesse.
Right. So he's just asking about the condominium association or HOA estoppel letter. He basically says that there are legal requirements to deliver an estoppel letter within a prescribed period of time as to both a condo and an HOA. And the answer is yes. They have 10 business days after the request to provide an estoppel letter. However, when we're under a state of emergency and people are on lockdown, I would say they have a good argument that that period could or should be extended. As far as I know, everybody has responded to me except for this one association in Miami-Dade. Everything is still operational here. But I would say that you do have a right of action against them if they don't respond within 10 legal days. But then again, are you going to get into that if they're, if you're on complete lockdown and there's a health public emergency? I would say that there's good arguments that they could be longer for that reason. I mean, the statutes when they wrote them didn't contemplate everyone being at home and businesses being shut down and locked down. And I don't think that specifically a condo or HOA is listed as an essential business. I haven't seen that anywhere. So they can have an argument that they're shut down.
Go
May
ahead, Jeff.
I?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Holly, is there a specific statutory exception, something located in the statutes themselves in 718 or in 720, affording them that off-ramp to
No,
not do it in a timely manner?
no, there isn't.
So from a strict statutory construction standpoint, the legislature has not given them an off-ramp.
Correct.
Okay, so
That
they
was the
must do it.
statute.
No excuses.
Well, I mean, I think that you would have a hard argument in a court of law because the courts do consider other extraneous factors when applying laws. But you're right. It says 10 days and there's no stated exceptions for global pandemics or acts of God.
So do we have courts of law, or do we have courts of policy? I mean, if a court of law is to apply the law, they are to apply the law as they find it on the books, not become a court of social policy.
I've seen them be courts of social policy.
Okay.
So what happens in court during this whole pandemic is going to be it's a novel situation. For example, right now I am in 2 evictions that we started back in February, way before anything shut down with the coronavirus. One one eviction is the basically non-compliance of lease for parking cars in front of their driveway and fixing them. So not even a non-payment issue. And then another one is he agreed to vacate in writing and he didn't vacate. And he agreed all of this back in February. And so, the novel situation about what I'm doing is, I'm going against, and I'm representing the landlord, of course, and I'm going against the Florida Supreme Court order that says that the clerks are not required to issue immediately writs of possession. So even that language can be, if you look at the Supreme Court order, some clerks have determined that they have the ability to, but they're just not required to. And some clerks have said that basically says that that's a complete restriction, that they can't. So even that little sentence that the Florida Supreme Court did about evictions is a novel and new situation that hasn't been tested in a court of law. So I'm even having to go to the judge and say, this is not something that should be affected by coronavirus. This happened way before we were all on lockdown. He shouldn't have cars. It's a public health policy. It's a child issue. And just try to argue, which is a novel argument that I've never seen before, to get the judge to order the clerk to issue the writ of possession. And who knows whether it'll work. So I think a lot of these situations, whether it's contract cancellations or what I'm dealing with in evictions, is something that we've never seen in our lifetime. And the judges are going to be challenged, as well as the attorneys, to try to get a fair result, on all sides.
Tamiko has a question that she put in the group chat. Do you know if any legislation has been set in place for homeowners with HOA fees? Are the HOA fees being waived if a landlord has a rental property with an HOA and their tenant is not able to pay the rent? The landlord may be able to make an adjustment with a lender for the mortgage, but what about the HOA fees?
I have heard nothing about any waiver of HOA fees or condo fees. I think those are still accruing completely as normal.
Did that answer your question, Tamiko? Okay. Are there any other questions? Well, there's no other questions, then thank you so much, Holly, for taking the time to speak with us today.